Wage talks under the facilitation of the CCMA to bring to an end strike action by FlySafair pilots will resume this afternoon. The parties, FlySafair and Trade Union Solidarity, met at the union's office on Wednesday for hours until late in the night as the two tried to find each other. Now, the pilots are demanding a 10.5% salary increase and a revised rostering for the workers, while the employer is offering 5.7% wage hike. For more on this, let's now welcome our economics reporter, Katlego Legodi, who joins me now in the studio. You've been watching developments, Katlego, of course. Good afternoon. So it's been roughly 5 days since the strike. The parties still trying to find each other. Let's start perhaps with the talks with the CCMA. What are you hearing? What do you know at this point?
A very good afternoon to you, Unati, and of course to our viewers at home. It's been, almost a week of this strike action by pilots belonging to Trade Union Solidarity. You know, they down tools over wages, embarking on this industrial action that earlier on in the week shook the industry in terms of the frustrations that we saw on the ground. And this, I guess, knocked a little bit of urgency in the CCMA's corner to say they need to now bring these parties together. And from Wednesday, that's when we saw them sitting, and they're trying by all means to find each other so they can bridge this impasse. We're told that talks are at an advanced stage, looking at the fact that both of the parties are in agreement that they would not want this strike to prolong, looking at the implications that would be dire for not only the country's economy, but also the workers themselves, because this becomes a no work, no pay kind of an embarkment that they went into. But also at the same time, remember that they were locked out by the employer, who was then exercising his rights to try by all means to bring the workers back in terms of them, picking up the tools and flying. But that really frustrated the workers to a point whereby they extended the strike to 2 weeks. So from Wednesday, they've been sitting. The meeting is behind closed doors. They're not letting us in, really, in terms of the day-to-day or hour-to-hour activities. Instead, they've asked that we give them some space so they're able to negotiate without any interference. So on Wednesday, we were there on the ground in terms of the venue, this being the Solidarity headquarters in Centurion, where this meeting is sitting. It went on, you're right, for hours. They ended up very late in the night. And, to us, as the hours were going by, we're just thinking that, oh, maybe they're finding each other. Late at night, there will be that announcement that they're picking up the tools now. Their strike has been called off, but we saw that process rolled over to today, which is Friday. They started about an hour ago, 2 o'clock. This is when they started this meeting. And they're still trying to find each other so they can really avert this strike action prolonging for about 2 weeks.
From an operations standpoint, how are we looking at the moment? We know, of course, that the pilots were locked out. Is that still the condition? What's happening on the ground?
That is still the case.
On the air?
That is still the case because of the fact that, the employer was exercising his right. But at the same time, we saw the employer not anticipating that more workers would join in because this was supposed to scare them off and then for them to more or less report for duty, which is why what they were announcing last week, that they would have contingency measures in place, were disrupted on Monday. Hence, we saw 26 of those flights grounded. And then we saw as well the impact of this. And really, when you look at it, the airline, the employer had to move with time, to ensure that at least operations are not affected any further. There were frustrations on various of these airports, including the OR Tambo International Airport and the Lanseria International Airport, which is where we were on Tuesday. And you get a sense that the employer was kind of shaken off to a point whereby they had to enforce now a firm agreement. This would be an agreement with the South African Airways, the national carrier, to help them in picking up some of the load in terms of the flights, the pilots that had not reported for duty. So we saw SAA coming through. This agreement is in place until Sunday. So things are pretty stable. this afternoon speaking to Kirby Gordon, the Chief Marketing Officer for FlySafair, just gauging where things are and whether, they are still seating this afternoon, because things can just change. It's an industrial action, confirming that indeed they are seating this afternoon. The operations are pretty stable. They are operating at over 90% of those flights that would be on schedule, and also communicating with the passengers to say that do go into the airport, and then if we are not able to accommodate you, there would be a delay, but then we will accommodate you eventually, because this was not the case on Monday, because on Monday flights were cancelled and a lot of people were frustrated to a point whereby others were seeking to say that they would want a refund because they just don't want to fly anymore.
Just on that SAA matter, the General Industrial Workers Union has, of course, asked for details around the deal between SAA and FlySafair to be made public. They don't seem to be very happy about this. What can you tell us about, other effects that the strike is having?
Very well that, for instance, FlySafair enjoys 60% of the market share in terms of the domestic airlines, the domestic passengers, the movement of passengers in terms of the domestic routes. And this was a concern as well from various of those that are in the aviation space to say, if we see this airline enjoying this dominance and we see, more or less a majority of their pilots going on strike, then what would this mean? So the airline was saying that they are well within their rights. I mean, this is a firm agreement. It's something that is accommodated for in terms of the Labor Relations Act. It's an agreement that they went into. And GEWUSA is saying indeed that they would want the details around this, but most of the concerns were about the fact that we need to see SAA enjoying that dominance, because they are a national carrier instead of an airline like FlySafair that would find itself in this situation when there's a strike action in place. But those details are still sketchy, only for the airline to say that they enjoy this as per the Labor Relations Act, and what would have happened if more or less SAA was in the same situation, that could have reached out to FlySafair. It's something that is not unusual, that you'd reach out to another airline to help you carry the load, looking at somewhat of a crisis that we find ourselves in, especially what happened on Monday when most of the people were shocked, were caught off guard in terms of the contingency measure that did not kick in. So this counts as a contingency measure as the two parties try to find each other.
And I wonder how long that contingency measure is going to last. I mean, that's probably why the union wants this to be made public in terms of that agreement. But very quickly, as we wrap up, Katlego, you, of course, have been speaking to a number of people. When we talk about finding each other, I mean, the union, the pilots are demanding 10.5% salary increase. The employer, FlySafair, is only offering 5.7%. When we talk about finding each other, what does that look like? I mean, are we likely to see some form of an agreement, or are they really sticking to that 2 weeks of protest?
So both of them are in agreement that it won't serve any of them if the strike prolongs to a point whereby we're hearing that the workers are willing to compromise in terms of the wages, in terms of the percentages. They're willing to tweak that and go down so they can meet the employer somewhat halfway, but they're not willing to compromise on the rostering issue. And the reason why the rostering issue becomes apex here is because of what I've just said, that FlySafair enjoys 60% of this market share. And when you look at it, this would be around 174 of the flights that go out every day. And, hour in, hour out, if you go into OR Tambo International Airport and look at the board, you'd see that FlySafair is a very busy airline. So I guess the workers are worried that, in terms of the working environment, they would want to start there to say, please at least relieve us a bit, and then we'll talk about the wages. We're hearing that they're willing to at least, more or less go down a bit in terms of their percentages, but they wanted to start the talks there at the rostering issue, because that speaks to their lives and everything else that has to do with the workers. And after that, everything else will follow in terms of the wages, and hopefully later on in the evening we'll have an answer, a decision as to whether the strike action would be called off or it goes into the weekend, and then it will be going into the second week, because the CCMA won't sit with them over the weekend.
I mean, it will be interesting to see, because, I mean, as you've also said previously, the pilots are saying, or the union in fact is saying, that FlySafair is negotiating in bad faith. But Well, it'll be interesting to see. So you have a very long day ahead. Hopefully it won't be another Wednesday scenario where they were negotiating until the early hours of the morning. But thank you so much, Katlego, for that. Of course, our economics reporter, Katlego Legodi, just monitoring and watching those developments there for us.